There are two versions of my life. The one people see: a decent apartment in Columbus, a steady job in project management, a packed schedule that leaves me exhausted by Thursday, and the one that actually keeps me sane. The one that lives in my garage. My father passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, which means it was fast and it was brutal, and none of us were ready, not even close. He was 58 years old, and he had the kind of laugh that made strangers turn around in restaurants. And one morning, he was just gone. The grief was the kind you don't talk about in polite company, the kind that sits in your chest like a stone you've learned to breathe around. What he left me, besides a mountain of paperwork and a complicated relationship with the word unfair, was a 1969 Ford Mustang Fastback in the most beautiful shade of Highland Green you've ever seen in your life. He'd been restoring it since before I was born. It wasn't finished when he died. That was the part that gutted me the most, not that he left, but that he left in the middle of something. The car sat under a canvas tarp in his garage for 8 months before I could even walk past it without losing it entirely. Then one Saturday in January, I drove to my mother's house, pulled back the tarp, sat in the driver's seat, and just talked to him for about an hour. I told him I was going to finish it. I told him it was going to be perfect. I had zero mechanical knowledge at the time. Zero. I watched approximately 400 YouTube videos in the following year. I took a weekend course on bodywork. I made friends with an older guy named Don at the classic car club my father used to attend, and Don taught me more than I could ever repay. I spent every weekend for 2.5 years working on that car in my garage. New upholstery, rebuilt engine, fresh paint, the same Highland Green, color matched exactly. Every penny I had that wasn't going toward rent or groceries went into that car. I finished it 11 months ago. I drove it for the first time with the windows down on a Tuesday evening in April, and I called my mother from a parking lot somewhere in Clintonville, and we both cried for 15 minutes. It was the closest I had felt to my father since the day he died. That car was not a car. That was everything. My brother is 3 years younger than me. He's always been the charming one, the one who can walk into any room and have everyone laughing within 5 minutes, the one my mother describes as a free spirit, and my father used to describe, more accurately, as someone who will figure it out eventually. He has never quite figured it out. At 31, he's had 4 jobs in 3 years, lives in a 1-bedroom apartment he can barely afford, and has a talent for landing in situations where someone else ends up paying the bill. He's not malicious, or at least that's what I always told myself. He's just careless. He's careless with other people's things, in the way that people who've never really had anything precious are sometimes careless. Nothing has ever meant to him what that Mustang meant to me, which is why what happened next should have surprised me more than it did. It started with a text from a woman I didn't know. This was on a Friday evening in October. I was making dinner, half watching something on TV, and my phone buzzed with a message from a number not in my contacts. The text said, "Hi. Just wanted to confirm we're still good for Saturday at 2? So excited for the shoot. The car is absolutely gorgeous in the photos." I stared at that message for a long time. I typed back, "I think you have the wrong number." She sent back a screenshot. It was a listing. A Facebook Marketplace post, which I had never seen in my life, advertising a 1969 Highland Green Mustang Fastback, available for photoshoots and wedding rentals, $200 for 2 hours, $350 for 4 hours. Professional photography welcome. Elopements a specialty. The listing included 6 photos of my car. My car, in my driveway, taken without my knowledge, probably on a day when my brother had stopped by. The contact listed was a phone number I recognized immediately. My brother's number. I put my spatula down very carefully. I turned off the stove. I sat down at my kitchen table, and I read that listing 3 more times to make sure I was understanding what I was reading. My brother had photographed my car, created a rental listing without my knowledge or permission, and had been charging strangers $200 to $300 to use it. For photoshoots. For weddings. For whatever they wanted, apparently. My car. My father's car. The car I had spent 2.5 years, and more money than I want to calculate, restoring with my own hands as an act of grief and love and promise-keeping. He had turned it into a side hustle. I called him immediately. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text that said, Call me right now. I saw the listing. 3 minutes passed. My phone rang. Hey, so, when? I said. Were you going to tell me? He did what my brother always does when he's been caught. He pivoted to the explanation before I could finish being angry. It wasn't a big deal. He'd only done it twice. He was careful with it, always rode with the client, never let anyone else drive. He thought I'd be okay with it since the car just sits there most of the time. He was going through a rough patch financially. He was going to cut me in on the profits once he got rolling. He just hadn't gotten around to mentioning it yet. You have a booking for tomorrow, I said. Yeah, this couple doing engagement photos. It's 2 hours. I was going to cancel it. It's a deposit situation. I can't really cancel it tonight, or I will call the police and report my car as being used for commercial purposes without my authorization, which, by the way, is exactly what this is. He went quiet. When my brother goes quiet, it usually means he's calculating. You're overreacting, he said finally. I would have told you. You didn't tell me. You photographed my property without asking, listed it for commercial rental without asking, collected money without asking, and you did all of this with Dad's car. My voice did something I didn't intend it to do on that last part. I hated that it did that. Cancel the booking tonight. Take down the listing. And I need to know every single time you rented it out and how much money you collected. He said he would. We hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for a while longer, and then I went and stood in my garage and looked at the car, and I really checked it for the first time since I'd parked it 2 weekends ago. That was when I found the scratch. It was on the passenger side, rear quarter panel. Small, maybe 3 inches, but deep enough to have gone through the clear coat. In Highland Green. Do you know how hard it is to touch up a color-matched classic repaint? I had to sit down on the garage floor. My brother had not ridden along with every client. Or if he had, he hadn't noticed. Or he hadn't bothered to tell me. Someone had scratched my father's car, and my brother had collected their money and said nothing. I didn't call him back that night. I needed to think. He texted me at 11 p.m. The message said, "Listings down. Saturday booking canceled." I'm sorry about this. I know I should have asked. Can we talk this week? I did not respond. The next morning, my phone rang at 9 a.m. It was my mother. I should tell you about my mother, because she is important to this story in the way that enabling parents are always important to these stories. She loves both of her children. She has always loved my brother in a way that is slightly more anxious than the way she loves me, because he has always needed more managing, and over the years that anxiety has calcified into something that looks a lot like defending him before he's even been accused of anything. She is not a bad person. She is a person who has spent 31 years waiting for her son to figure it out and has gotten very good at explaining away the reasons he hasn't yet. I talked to your brother last night, she said. I assumed. He feels terrible. Good. He said you threatened to call the police on him. I said I would report my car as being used for unauthorized commercial purposes, which is what happened. She made a sound I've heard my whole life, a small exhale that means she's about to reframe the situation. He's going through a hard time right now. You know how tight things have been for him. He was trying to be resourceful. He was renting out Dad's car. A pause. I understand that feels significant to you. It is significant. It's not a feeling. He wasn't going to hurt it. He loves that car too. I asked her about the scratch. She didn't know about the scratch. There was a longer pause. Well, she said, that's something he'll have to make right. But I don't think you need to involve the police over a scratch and a misunderstanding. I want to be clear about something. Up until this point, I had not actually involved the police. I had threatened to, in the context of a conversation where I was telling my brother to stop doing something illegal. I had taken no formal action. I had simply told him to stop. But my mother's framing a misunderstanding was doing something to my blood pressure that I needed to walk away from before I said something I couldn't take back. Mom, I said, I need you to understand something. That is not just a car. I spent 2.5 years finishing what Dad started. I did that for him and for me, and it is the most important object I own. Your son photographed it without permission, rented it for money without permission, and it came back scratched. This is not a misunderstanding. This is him taking something that wasn't his to take. She said she understood. I don't think she did. Over the next 4 days, I heard from my brother twice more. Both times were texts. Both times were variations of, "I'm really sorry. I know I messed up. Can we please talk?" I read them and I didn't respond, because I was trying to figure out what I actually wanted from this situation. An apology wasn't going to fix the scratch. Money could fix the scratch. A proper color-matched repaint of that quarter panel was going to cost somewhere between $400 and $600 at a shop that knew what they were doing. But that wasn't really the point either. The point was that he had looked at something I built from grief and love and years of Saturdays, and he had seen a revenue stream. I started doing some quiet research. I went back through his Facebook activity as much as I could see it, and I found references to the rental in 2 separate posts he'd shared in a local photography group, both of which had been taken down. Based on the comments I could still see, it looked like he'd done at least 4 or 5 bookings, possibly more. At $200 to $300 per booking, he had made somewhere between $800 and $1,500 off my property. He had not mentioned cutting me in. He had not mentioned the money at all. I went to my garage again, and I looked at the scratch again, and I made a decision. I called a lawyer. I know a woman I went to college with who does civil and property law, and I described the situation. She listened carefully. She said that what my brother had done was, at minimum, conversion under Ohio law, the unauthorized use of someone else's property for personal gain. She said I had a reasonable civil case for the rental income he'd collected plus the cost of repairs. She also said that if I wanted to go the criminal route, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle was on the table, though that was a more complicated road. I thanked her. I thought about it for another day. Then I called my brother. He answered on the first ring, which told me he'd been waiting. "I need 3 things from you," I said. "I need a complete and honest accounting of every rental you did, dates, amounts, who booked. I need you to pay for the repair to the quarter panel, which will be whatever my body shop charges. And I need you to sign a written acknowledgement that the car is my property and that you used it without authorization, because I need that for my records." That last thing sounds like you're building a legal case against me. I'm protecting myself. Same thing you should have been doing before you rented out my car without asking. He said the written thing was too much, that it sounded like I was trying to get him in trouble, that he'd already said he was sorry, and he didn't understand why I needed to make it official. I told him I'd give him 48 hours to think about it and send me the accounting of the rentals in the meantime, and then I hung up. The accounting never came. What came instead, 26 hours later, was a phone call from my aunt, my mother's older sister, who I like genuinely and who I had not spoken to in 3 months. She opened with, "I know this isn't my business, but I talked to your mom and I just wanted to say," and I knew exactly where the conversation was going before she got there. The family communication tree had been activated. My brother had been on the phone. "He's not a bad kid," she said. "I know he's not a bad kid. Bad kids and bad decisions aren't the same thing. Your mom says you want him to sign some kind of legal document. I want a written record that he acknowledges what happened. That seems like a lot. Sweetheart. He made a mistake. I love my aunt." I ended the conversation politely, and then I sat with the particular exhaustion of being the person in a family situation who is objectively correct and still somehow being managed. That evening, I drove over to my mother's house unannounced. My brother's car was in the driveway. Of course it was. They'd been talking. I walked in without knocking, which is the prerogative of someone who grew up in a house and has not yet been given a reason to knock. My mother was in the kitchen. My brother was at the kitchen table. They had the look of people who had been mid-conversation and were now recalibrating. "I'm not here to fight," I said. I sat down across from my brother. "I'm here because I want to look at you when I tell you this, so there's no confusion about what I mean. You took something from me that I built for Dad. You made money off it. You didn't tell me. It got scratched. And then, instead of handling it like an adult, you called Mom and Aunt Cheryl and whoever else so that I'd get worn down by a phone tree before I could follow through on anything. I see the play. I'm not going to lose my temper. I'm also not going to forget what you did." My brother looked at the table. My mother looked at me. She started to say something about how we were family, and I held up my hand gently, but I held it up. "I'm not asking for your opinion on this, Mom. I love you. This is between him and me." I turned back to my brother. "You have until Friday. The accounting and the repair money. That's it. If I don't have both of those things by Friday, I'm filing the civil paperwork. He said I was being dramatic. He said I always did this, made everything into a bigger deal than it needed to be. I noticed, with a kind of clinical detachment, that he had managed to go from "I'm so sorry" to "you're the problem" in about 72 hours, which is a transition I should probably have seen coming. I stood up. I said goodbye to my mother. I drove home. Friday came, no accounting, no money. A text from my brother that said, "I need more time. Money is tight right now. I told you I would handle it." A text from my mother that said, "Please give him a little more time. He's trying." I called my lawyer friend back on Friday afternoon. We talked for 40 minutes. By the end of the conversation, I had a plan. The first thing I did was file a small claims court case for the estimated rental income. I put it at $900, the conservative estimate plus $520, which was the quote I had gotten from the body shop for the quarter panel repair. Total claim, $1,420. The second thing I did was contact Facebook Marketplace through their official reporting process and report the listing, which I had screenshotted before it came down as an unauthorized commercial listing involving a vehicle that didn't belong to the lister. I wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but I wanted a paper trail everywhere I could make one. The third thing I did was contact my insurance company and document the unauthorized use and the damage, because my lawyer friend had suggested this strongly. The fourth thing, and this is the one that mattered, I called the one booking I still had a lead on. The engagement photo couple who had been canceled the previous Saturday had apparently been told by my brother that the cancellation was due to a scheduling conflict and had asked to rebook. I knew this because the original woman had texted me again. When she texted, I had written back and asked if she'd be willing to tell me when the rescheduled booking was supposed to be. She was confused. I explained briefly that the car didn't actually belong to the person who had listed it, and that I was the owner, and that I wanted to make sure no further unauthorized bookings took place. She was horrified. She'd put down a $75 deposit. She asked if she'd get it back. I told her I would personally return her deposit out of my own pocket, because she was an innocent party and none of this was her fault. I asked for her Venmo. I sent her $75 that afternoon. She told me she had screenshotted the conversation with my brother and would be happy to share it if I needed documentation. I thanked her and told her yes, please. The small claims paperwork was served to my brother 8 days later. I know this because my mother called me within 2 hours of service. "You actually did it." I said I would. He's devastated. He said he can't believe you'd take him to court over something like this. I noticed that we had completed the full journey from a misunderstanding to something like this without any acknowledgement that something like this was my brother, running an unauthorized rental business, using a car I rebuilt from my grief, over losing our father. That journey from the specific and serious to the vague and diminished is one I have watched happen in my family my entire life, and I was done riding along. "Mom," I said, "I love you. I'm not going to keep having this conversation. If he wants to resolve this without a court date, he has my number. The terms haven't changed," she cried. I sat with that, which is the hardest part, not the brother, not the logistics, but sitting with the knowledge that you're causing your mother pain even when you're right. That part doesn't get easier. You just get better at not letting it make your decisions for you. My brother called me the next morning. Not a text, a call. He was different on the phone this time. The calculation was gone. He sounded tired. "I don't want to go to court," he said. "I know. I'm going to get you the money. All of it. The repair, and I'll figure out the rental amount. I just need a couple weeks. The court date is in 6 weeks. You have time. I need you to drop the case, though. I can't have this on my record. Pay me first. Then we'll talk about the case." A very long silence. That's a lot of trust to ask for after everything." "Yes," I said. "It is. Welcome to where we are." He paid me in 2 installments over the following 3 weeks. First $520, which I took directly to the body shop. The quarter panel came out perfect, you'd never know. Then $900, which I held in a separate account because I wasn't sure what to do with money that had come from something so deeply strange. I eventually donated it to a scholarship fund at the vocational school where I'd taken my automotive course. It felt right. 2 days after the second payment, I filed to withdraw the small claims case. My brother got a notification. He did not say thank you, at least not immediately. He sent a text that said, "Case dismissed. Thanks for dropping it." I didn't respond to that either. He called about 3 weeks later. A different kind of call again. He asked if we could have dinner. I said I needed a little more time. He said okay. That was 4 months ago. We've had dinner twice since then. We're not where we were before, and honestly, I'm not sure I want to be where we were before. Because where we were before was a dynamic that made this possible. We're something new, something with clearer edges. He knows now that I mean what I say. I know now that I can follow through without burning everything to the ground. My mother still brings it up occasionally, in the way that mothers with peacemaking instincts bring things up not confrontationally, just wistfully, as if the whole situation might still turn out to be a dream if she mentions it enough times. I let her talk. I don't renegotiate. The car is in my garage right now. The quarter panel is perfect. On Sunday mornings when the weather is decent, I take it out on the highway for about 40 minutes, nothing aggressive, just cruising. I keep the windows down. I play whatever my father would have played, which is Springsteen, and occasionally Creedence, and once, when I was feeling sentimental, the Allman Brothers at full volume on a country road outside of town. He would have finished it differently than I did, probably. Different choices on the upholstery, maybe. He had strong opinions about chrome, but I think he would have been proud of the green. I think he would have understood every decision I made, not just the car ones. Here is what I want to say to anyone listening who is in the middle of something like this, because I know some of you are. When someone takes something precious from you, something you built or inherited or poured yourself into, and the people around you start using words like overreacting and misunderstanding, and can't you just let it go? What they're really asking is whether your sense of what matters is negotiable. They're asking you to agree that the thing you cherish is less significant than the discomfort of consequences. You are allowed to say no to that. You are allowed to document everything. You are allowed to talk to a lawyer. You are allowed to file paperwork and follow through and hold the line without screaming or crumbling or letting the guilt of someone else's consequences make you soft on things that are genuinely hard. Protecting what you've built is not cruelty. It is not drama. It is the basic dignity of taking your own life seriously. My brother made a mistake. He made it worse by not coming clean. He made it worse again by letting the family work the phone tree instead of handling his own mess. But the mistake that would have cost me the most wasn't his, it would have been mine, if I had let it go because it was easier. If I had decided that keeping the peace was worth more than keeping my word to my father, I finished what he started. I was going to protect what I finished. I drove home on a Tuesday with the windows down, and the engine sounded the way it always sounds, low and steady, and exactly right, and I thought about my dad for a while, and then I thought about nothing, and both felt like enough.